30 of the richest people on Earth voted to give themselves a $500 million payday each. The NBA Board of Governors voted to formally explore expanding the league to 32 teams with new franchises in Seattle and Las Vegas. Finally, but we're not there yet. Here's what people are getting wrong about this vote. The owners didn't vote to order Wagyu steak and lobster. They voted to get in the car and drive to the restaurant. The binding vote to actually expand comes in July, so that's when they'll place their order for that juicy ribeye. And when the two new teams start playing in the 2028-29 season, that's when we finally get our food. I'm your host Kyle, and welcome to Basketball Business, where we explore how off-court decisions like voting to expand to Seattle and Vegas shapes the on-court game of basketball. Today, we're breaking down the business case of NBA expansion, why it makes sense now and not 5 years ago, and why 30 billionaire owners decided they couldn't say no to an extra $500 million. For as long as I've been a fan of the NBA, they've always talked about expanding ever since the Seattle SuperSonics relocated to Oklahoma City in 2008. But why now and not 5 or 10 years ago? Well, the answer is money. It's always money, but the sequencing of this money matters for why expansion took so long. During the 2020 and 2021 seasons, when the NBA had to cut their schedule because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they were in a major cash crunch. So people started throwing around the idea of adding 2 new teams and getting that expansion fee to cover the losses. But hold on a minute there, partner, the NBA said, because they had this big deal that they didn't want to mess with by adding 2 new teams. Their next national media rights deal. In July of 2024, they finally signed it for $76 billion over 11 years. Disney, Amazon, NBC, all paying to stream or broadcast games nationally. That locked in $6.9 billion a year in guaranteed revenue to the league and gave the 30 owners the one thing they needed to model expansion: certainty. Before that deal closed, you couldn't calculate what going from 30 to 32 teams would actually cost each owner in diluted revenue. Now you can, roughly $14 million per team per year. But then the sale started. The Celtics sold for $6.1 billion. The Lakers sold for $10 billion. The Trailblazers went for $4.3 billion, bringing up the floor of NBA team valuations. Each sale pushed franchise valuations higher, which pushed projected expansion fees higher, which made the math more favorable for existing owners to wait on expansion. The NBA was never going to expand and set those fees for expansion until they had fresh comps. And with the new TV deal and record sale prices for franchises raising the bar, now they were ready to rock and roll. And here's a piece that deserves more attention, especially in the context of the NBA expanding to 32 teams. Their own European league is farther along than what the public thinks. The league has been quietly building an international league in conjunction with FIBA, expected to launch by late 2027, before domestic expansion hits. That additional revenue stream makes adding 2 new teams easier to absorb because the total pie is growing, not just getting sliced thinner. The NBA wanted Europe sorted first, and it sounds like they've got it. So why does an expansion fee exist at all? Expansion is pretty much selling equity in the league, and the fee covers that dilution in equity. When you go from 30 to 32 teams, every existing owner's share of national revenue drops from 3.33% to 3.13%. That fraction compounds over decades. The fee compensates for that dilution upfront. Here's the comparison. In 2004, the Charlotte Bobcats paid $300 million to join the league. The most recent team sale at the time, the Celtics, for a $360 million price tag in 2002. The Bobcats entered at 83 cents on the dollar compared to a recent sale. If you were to apply that same ratio to the Lakers' $10 billion sale, the expansion fees should land somewhere north of $8 billion per team. Reports are that the fees will be between $7 and $10 billion per franchise. So if both teams sell for a combined $15 billion, each existing owner pockets $500 million in straight cash. Those fees go straight to the owners. Not a single penny is shared with the players. Nothing goes in the basketball-related income account. Just a direct deposit of $500 million or so to 30 wealthy billionaire owners. But there's a ghost haunting this deal. In 1976, the Spirits of St. Louis got cut from the ABA-NBA merger. Instead of a $3 million buyout, the Silno brothers, who owned the team at the time, negotiated a perpetual cut of TV revenue from the 4 ABA teams that joined the league. The first check was for a measly $286,000. By 2010, they were raking in $17.5 million a year. Total take before they finally settled in 2014, roughly $800 million from a deal that looked like it was a rounding error when it was signed. The expansion fee has that same structural question. A $500 million check today seems enormous, but you're permanently diluting a revenue stream that has grown exponentially into billions of dollars for the past 50 years. Whether the owners come out ahead or not, it depends entirely on the discount rate that will use to be determined the expansion fee, which no one can agree on. If this kind of NBA business and finance content interests you, subscribe, because that's all we do here at Basketball Business, finding out how the off-court moves impact the on-court game. One more financial wrinkle that no one was expecting: Washington State just passed a 9.9% millionaires tax that will take effect in 2028, potentially months before the revamped Seattle SuperSonics start playing. They were previously one of 9 states that had no state income tax, a massive recruiting advantage that teams in Florida and Texas currently enjoy. Now, it's gone before it even started. Seattle Seahawks general manager John Schneider said agents were texting him immediately once the vote got passed, telling him he can't use that pitch anymore. For a max player making $50 million, that's roughly $2.5 million a year in new state income taxes on home games alone. Over a 5-year max deal, the gap between signing in Seattle versus no tax Nevada, Florida, or Texas could run $10 to $15 million. Las Vegas plays in no tax Nevada from day one. Seattle does not. This is the first in a multi-part series of videos we're doing on the expansion of the NBA, so make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you know immediately when they drop. In part 2, we're talking about the expansion draft itself, including a salary cap loophole that feels so clean it should be illegal, and we're also talking about the mafia-type extortion that teams will do during the draft. And stay tuned for the deep dive on the history of the Seattle SuperSonics and how they lost their team, because the more I research this topic, the worse it got. And Seattle, they really need their team back. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the business behind NBA expansion. If you enjoyed or learned something new, please like, comment, and share with someone who's excited to see teams in Seattle and Las Vegas. Subscribe to Basketball Business for more great videos on how off-court money moves shape the on-court game of basketball. Until next time, this is Kyle with Basketball Business.